Hello, welcome. You're watching Perspective, and I'm Biman Swastoyo, your host. Today in our studio is Mr. Len Edwards. He is Distinguished Fellow of the Center for International Governance Innovation, Canada. So it's CG. Welcome.
Thank you.
One reason that Mr. Len Edwards is here is that there will be, on the 27th, if I'm not mistaken, tomorrow.
Well, it starts this evening.
There is a Canada-Indonesian forum, the first one.
Mm-hmm.
Now, can you tell me what it is?
Yeah. Well, it's a good question because it really is the first of its kind, as you pointed out.
All right.
It's an attempt by my organization, CG, and we're working.
Which is private, which is independent, or what?
It's private.
Government?
It's private. It's private. It's an institution that was set up in Canada some years ago with some government money, but also the founder of BlackBerry, the company, put money into this, and it's Canada's really premier think tank on international affairs. Right. So we approached CSIS here in Jakarta, headed by Joseph Wanandi and Rizal Sukma, to put on this forum, and it's really an attempt to try and re-energize some thinking about the relationship. You know, like all of these relationships that go back decades, they have their ebbs and their flows and so forth. There's a feeling in Canada, certainly in my organization, that we need to re-energize it. And my sense is, in talking to CSIS and Wanandi, Joseph and Rizal Sukma, that there's an interest here to do the same. So really that's what it's about, is to give some new emphasis, bring some new ideas.
When you say re-energize, is it like changing, looking at new fields, or looking at developing fields where we're already cooperating, or is it?
Well, you know, we already have a very substantial relationship. It's not all that well known. But like all substantial relationships, it falls into, you know, people take each other for granted, and it's a time. So what we want to do is kind of probe a little bit at the relationship, try and find some of the areas within the very broad spectrum that we're looking at that really can take some emphasis and some concentrated effort.
All right. And is it limited? Like, for example, our main core is trade, investment, relation-wise. Is it still the same areas that you're
Well, I
think,
you know, like all countries, and your country is no different, and indeed your president's emphasis on economics and trade is very, very much like my government's emphasis, and that is that this is really what drives interest in international relationships now, a lot. And so we will spend a good deal of time looking at the economic and trade relationship.
And who's taking part in this forum?
Well, it's, you know, when we started out, we thought, well, it'd be more of an academic approach. But in fact, we've got some very broad interest in Canada. There are up to a dozen delegates coming from Canadian companies.
Specifically for this?
Yes, yes. Well, some are local representatives, but their companies back at home have you know, directed their representatives to participate. So there's a lot of interest. You know, companies like Bombardier, Manulife, Sun Life, both here established. Bombardier, of course, the railroad and air transport company. We've got Campotex sells huge amounts of fertilizer in the country. We also have a number of engineering firms interested in infrastructure. Cargill Canada, which is a major trader in agricultural commodities. So it's across the spectrum. We also have institutions like the Asia Pacific Foundation, of which I'm also a distinguished fellow, so I'm their representative here on that. The Conference Board of Canada, International Development Research.
The Foreign Ministry as well?
The Foreign Ministry. Well, it's interesting, you know, we've had terrific support from our own government, because the government is interested in it, but it's a non-governmental conference.
Right, right. What would be the difference? I mean, we've talked about there's a ministerial level meeting, bilateral as well, Indonesia, Canada. I think they do maybe also try to boost up relation and looking at ways. What would be the difference here? Well,
I think the main difference is that we're kind of free of government policy or an approaches, so we can kind of, you know, investigate things a bit more. As well, you know, governments are very much focused on certain transactional issues and priorities and so on. What we're trying to do is think outside the box, if you like, and So the forum is intended to bring new ideas to the table.
Inject fresh ideas.
Yeah, get fresh ideas, and drive it from a non-governmental point of view. Governments are really key in all of this. They're obviously the central part of any relationship, but I spent a long time in government, and my experience is that governments become very transactional, and oftentimes the sort of the immediate becomes the enemy of the strategic, and so we want to bring some strategy into the discussion.
So this is the first one.
The first one.
When you talk cooperation, for example, with CSIS, it's purely between private in that sense, organization.
Yes,
It's not an official like, Indonesia, Canada. When you see that, it implies you have a government behind them.
Well, we've had
as an organizer. I mean.
Well, I mean, the government's interested, and governments, when I was in government, we always valued these sorts of fora,
right?
Because they were free of the constraints of government,
right?
And they could investigate ideas in a way that governments can't. So we will see if this forum, and I expect it is going to be interesting, and there's interest from CSIS to do this back in Canada in a year or so. We'd be very happy to have a second one.
Okay, we will unfortunately have to break. We'll be back. Please don't leave us.